Hey guys, welcome back to another talking point video. It's been a while since I made one of these, so hopefully everyone's getting psyched. Like many of my other talking point videos, is going to seem a little trivial or silly or whatever, or at least it may seem like that to some of you. I think it's actually pretty important, and that's because I've seen a lot of people do this in the wild, either my clients or other things. And I wanted to maybe talk a bit about the ideas behind some of this stuff. And actually, one thing that happened is it did result in an accident, at least one that I know about. I'm certain that there's at least like 40 more that I don't know about. And as with anything with rappelling, you know, it kind of has a lot of possibilities for incidents around it. So I wanted to make a little video about something that seems very minute in your rappelling system, but it actually could be a big difference depending on your setup. If I look at the two main types of setups that I tend to employ while rappelling, there is one time where it doesn't matter, and then another time where this subject does matter. So I'm going to start with talking about why, or the setup where it wouldn't matter, and then if you want to just stop watching there and then use that in the rest of the video, then you totally can. More often in my climbing, if I'm doing like a series of rappels or even just one rappel, I may go for kind of like two different systems, and one system is for tethering myself to the anchor and the other system is for extending my rappel. And so starting with like the rappel extension part, I can grab a double length sling, thread that through my harness, you know, tie that. Now it's like completely redundant. And this is where my ATC is going to go. Then I'm going to take a separate tethering unit like this. Connect Adjust is probably the most common tethering unit that I use. I can attach that to my harness and attach that to my anchor. And then this acts as my tether to the anchor. So it's like fully good to go. It's like good thick rope, totally good enough to use on its own. I don't need to back it up or anything. And then I have a completely separate system right here that I can load the ropes into. There we go. Load the ropes, put on my third hand. And then the cool part about this particular thing is even when it's weighted, well, I lean up a bit, but I can pull slack through, test this whole separate system out, and then I can unclip this. And then here's the real point of the video, right, is where do we clip this onto our body? In this case, since it's completely separate, I can clip it anywhere I want. You know, I usually just stick it on my harness. Now I just have my entire system. I rappel down. When I make it to the next anchor, I pull this system out again, lock it up, pull it tight, and then I can dismantle my entire other rappel setup. And you don't have to use a double length for this. You can use something like a locker draw. Some people like using a locker draw as their straight up rappel tether, and they have the third hand on a separate locker on their belay loop. I tend to not carry a locker draw as much with me, and so that's kind of the system that I end up using. Another much less complicated system, but still pretty much the same, is using something like the dual connect adjust. So let me shove this thing through my harness here. There we go. So this is essentially everything that I just built out of raw materials, but it is a full system altogether. So I still have this thing. Clip that into the anchor, and then I keep a really large round stock on this thing just permanently because it'll take forever to wear out. But I use this whole thing rig up my rappel, put a third hand on, and then it's exactly the same system, only in kind of really a much more streamlined package. And once I have my third hand on, same deal as before. When I take this off, it doesn't matter where I clip it, because with where it's girth hitched through my harness, this is a completely separate system. So this is all good to go just as is, and it's a much more streamlined option than the system that I gave you before. Of course, this dual connect adjust isn't quite as versatile as the tools that I already have on my harness. So one thing I may do, or one thing I often do, is I give my clients a dual connect if we're going to do a bunch of rappelling, and then they have this entire system on their harness. It's really easy to work with, it's super strong, and it avoids any of the pitfalls I'm about to talk about coming up later in the video. So I often just have this thing ready to go for clients. I own 2 of them for 2 clients. And then I may do something more like a wacky system like this for myself, just because I end up using the raw materials throughout the climb. Okay, so now you've seen kind of my go-to rappel setup. And most often, you know, like if I'm single pitch guiding, I'll still have this thing on my harness just because I can run around the top, clip in, you know, rig up the anchor, do whatever I want. And it's just useful. Or if I'm cleaning an anchor, I can run up there, clip this thing in, and then maybe choose to rappel down depending on my belayer, something like that, or the group as a whole. It just helps me stay independent. I may still use like a single length sling or something like that, girth hitched through my harness as my rappel extension while I'm using that piece. So I really do, I even in that single pitch world will use a version of that same system. While I'm in the alpine, however, I often just use a single double length sling as a rappel tether, and I don't carry the dual connect or the connect adjuster, anything like that. So this is kind of my only real rappel item. And I may do this in the rock world as well if it's like a single rappel, like small rappel off of something, you know. But more often than not, this is kind of my go-to in alpine. And I'd say in the alpine, 95% of the time, I just bring a double length sling as my rappel tether. And this is where I see a little bit of a problem with people using rappel tethers in the wild. So what I'm going to do is readjust the camera so that way you guys are on crotch view, so that way you can kind of see the whole system together. All right, here we go, crotch view. Here's my anchor, by the way. I'm using this like Gravel orange carabiner, so that way it's like super obvious that it's not the one that I'm using in my hands. But yeah, so let's move into this. Here's my double length sling. I have plenty of other videos talking about the different types of rappel tethers that I may use. Like, for example, this one where you take a bite and tie that knot. So that's a really great tether if you want to clip in short to the anchor. So there you go, that one's pretty short. Another way of, or the most common way I tie an anchor or rappel tether in the real world is I just put an overhand or a figure 8 knot. And then here I can put it anywhere I want. So often if it's my personal tether, I'll put this closer to me. If it's clients' tethers, especially if we are stacking rappels, I often will tell them to tie a knot like this, and then I'll move it around for them for comfort. So maybe client number 3 has this knot way out here. Oftentimes, first person going down, you'd like to have this close, not too close, so that way you still get an extension with your ATC, just like that. And then you can put your third hand on your belay loop. So as I run through this system, you know, I'm all hooked up, locked to the anchor. I can bring up my third hand right here. 1, 2, 3, however many times you want to wrap that. Pull up some rope. ATC on there. And then having a nice long tether like this also helps me with checking to make sure that, you know, this whole system is loaded while still having a backup. And then I can unscrew my locker here and then attach this somewhere on my harness just to get it out of the way and then rappel down. So here's the big part of the video is where do we attach this thing onto our harness? Which, again, that's the part where I said this may sound silly, but I've seen a lot of different things now. And with a tether this long, it really doesn't matter where I clip it. So I could clip it off to my belay loop, and you notice how it's nice and floppy, so that's no problem. Oftentimes, I just tell my clients, take this and clip it back to your belay loop. There we go. And then it's not as out of the way, but it avoids a couple of problems that come in with depending on how you make your tether. And so I'm going to demonstrate that now with, I'll just unhook right here. There we go. So if my knot happens to be more than halfway out, or halfway or more away from my harness, so I'll move that maybe a bit closer. So if it's further away on that tether, I clip this in. And if I decide to clip this onto my harness, when I'm standing here, it's easy not to think about this, but I can clip in. And the minute I sit down, depending on how the angles work out, I can actually pull on my gear loop right here. Let me make it even more obvious. So if this is even further away from my harness, like maybe where that third person's clipped in, they clip it onto the gear loop here. And now you can really see an issue where the gear loop is actually pulling on the ATC loop back to my harness. Now, worst case scenario, your gear loop breaks and then you just pop right onto your ATC. That's totally fine. Maybe you lose some gear. It's not exactly the end of the world, but it's very annoying. So that's why I tell my clients, clip this back to their belay loop. So that way, if their knot is too far away, now it's at least connected to a strong point on your harness. So this won't do anything really other than make it more difficult to remove this at the lower anchor and clip in. That would be why my go-to is telling my clients, take this off the anchor, clip it onto your belay loop. That's like a huge fallback right there. I'm gonna actually remove this third hand here for the sake of clarity, but we can just assume that that's always on. So another thing that can happen, and I've seen this a number of times, I've talked to other folks about it before, is if you decide to tie this sort of rappel tether, like this one, you open yourself up to a slight possibility. Let me set this up perfectly. So there's the bar tack, and that can actually stop you and save your life depending on where you put it in this rappel tether. But I'm gonna put it in the place where it will not save my life. When you tie this BHK right here, you need to make sure you have all 4 strands and wrap them, all 4 of those strands, around all 4 strands. So now it's actually a full-on bite knot that won't come undone when you're sitting on this. If you happen to tie it wrong, like, oh man, I didn't even think about how I tie this wrong. Like if I miss this strand right here and loop it around 1, you get a knot that looks very similar, but it's actually a slip knot. So if I pull this strand right here, boop, an easy way to test that is actually to sit down on your tether. So if I tied my tether, I clip that into the anchor, and then I decide to sit on this, it will just pop out like that. But maybe that bar tacking, you know, if the bar tacking is in just the right spot, like right above the knot right here, it can actually slide in and catch for you. And then you can feel secure, believe it or not. So if I were to clip my ATC into this, and then ideally, I'd put on a third hand because that could help protect me. But if, you know, there's a person below me doing the firefighter's belay, I may choose not to. So if I decide to tie a bad knot, if I accidentally tie a bad knot right here, and then I take this thing off of the anchor, and then maybe it's even just dangling right there. Maybe it's connected to my gear loop, which isn't rated, and then it's already pulling a bit. I can start rappelling down, and maybe just because of the way the knot's slipping, it overrides the strength of the gear loop breaks, and then I could have this potentially slip back up. And I guess in theory, the carabiner would stop me and save my life. So, I mean, like, sketchy, but I guess as I'm working through this, that's okay. Okay, that's not ideal at all, but it still could save your life. If I leave this dangling right here, which can happen if you're pre-rigging rappels, you have this clip to the anchor. Maybe like I'm the third person that goes to, and then, or second person, first person. And then the beauty about pre-rigging rappels is you don't have to be attached to the anchor. So maybe I've chosen to take that off for the sake of comfort with my clients. Now, here's the really bad part is I have this loose end right here. So as I sit down to rappel, and then I can't do it when I'm on my shelf right here, but body weight will just make this thing slip up, and boom. And then I fall down. And that was the conversation I had with another person, is they had, the person that fell to the ground, their rappel tether looked like this. And they were like, I don't understand how there was a failure. And that was kind of my conclusion, is I think that they didn't tie that original knot correctly. This is another reason why a third hand backup on your belay loop can save your life too, because if I have a third hand backup on my belay loop, this stuff fails, that friction hitch has a pretty good chance of getting caught. If it's on my leg loop, then I'll probably flip over. Maybe I'll get caught, a lot less likely chance there. But by putting it on the belay loop and extending the rappel in the first place, you can sort of back up this system. Anyway, so going back to my scenario here, the knot's still mistied. I'm attached to the anchor. This is again why I coach my clients. Take this off, clip it to your belay loop. Yeah, and then if they want to lock it, then go for it. Then now, if they start rappelling, you get the standard slipping, going up until, boom, stops right at your belay loop. You can see how that loop gets bigger and bigger. And ideally, you're doing same partner checks at the top of the climb with rappelling as you do at the bottom. The reason why I tend to use this rappel tether most for clients is it's really hard to screw up. And it's nice for clients to have a bit of a longer reach at anchors. I'm not a big fan of doing the basket hitch with the knot for clients because those rappel tethers just tend to be way too small. Some of you may have noticed that, where's my ATC? I originally put my ATC into just the lower loop and I left it as such. That's okay because rappel tethers themselves don't need to be redundant. You need to have the redundant connection to the mountain. But you can always just clip, maybe you guys didn't see that well, you can always just clip this strand right here, then have your ATC in both of these loops. And that actually creates a redundant attachment point. So if I do this whole thing, lock it up, put on my third hand right here. All right, and then I can just grab this carabiner right here. And I bring this down and I could clip it into my gear loop, but there's no point in having redundancy in this tether if, if it's clipped to my gear loop. And same deal here, there's not really a reason to have the tether redundant when you're all clipped out. The real reason to have the tether redundant is on the rappel. When you bring the carabiner down, clip it into your belay loop, lock that, and then now if this fails or if I tie this knot wrong in some way and it starts slipping, it'll only slip to halfway through the sling. So for those of you who are really obsessed with having your rappel tether like absolutely redundant all the time, that's like a good system right there, is clipping into both of those holes, and then you can always bring this back down to your belay loop. You may have noticed most of the time, if I'm doing some sort of normal rappel like this, so this is not clipped in redundantly, lock that, spin this around. Okay, so I'm all rigged up for my rappel. Oftentimes, I only take the carabiner, clip it into the belay loop, and I don't lock it. And that's because it's not serving the redundancy purpose. It's just serving a get it out of the way purpose. And I already mentioned about how those few pitfalls where it's nice to have a locker in the system connected to a hard point. That's just a risk I'm willing to take because we always double check these systems, or at least when I'm guiding, I'll look at myself, I'll look at my clients, and I feel pretty good about that. When I'm actually building in redundancy to the system specifically, so if I take my rappel tether and I take both those strands right there, there we go. So since I took the time to clip both strands there and I have my locker here, when I take my carabiner out, clip it to my belay loop and lock it, because now I'm expecting that redundancy to be part of my safety system. And maybe that's a long-winded way of justifying why I do that. In the end, we just want reasons for doing things, and I figured someone's going to call me out in the comments for not clipping that and locking it. Actually, probably a number of people are going to call me out for a bunch of things, like not having two lockers up here and only having a single locker here and stuff like that. But just to sort of counteract some of those comments prematurely, I threw that one in there. All right, so there you have it, guys. It's a bit of a long-winded answer for something that seems super trivial, but it could have some real consequences in the future if you ever try to do this sort of thing, or if you have just the right, other things line up perfectly. So I think it's a worthy video to throw out there into the ethos. If anyone's digging my new jacket, you'll notice how I have a little V with ice axes right here. Stay tuned. Keep looking for this symbol in videos coming up. That is because there is a big opportunity in my life coming up, and I will be releasing a kind of news-ish video that talks all about that in the future. If you have other questions about this sort of thing or want me to make more of these sort of videos, then let me know. Everyone seems to love these videos, so I'm going to keep on making them. I have a few more videos coming up, and climbing season's right around the corner, so get psyched. It's still May here, so a bunch of Shasta ski work coming up. So I'm not going to quite become a climber until maybe next month, but yeah, excited to start getting out into the mountains again.
Here, my opinion.
And all of Lover's Leap.
At the grade.
At the grade of what, like 5'7"?
Uh-huh.
The best 5'7", huh?
Dude, it's up there, just period for me.
Wow.
Next bitch. I mean, it is. We'll see. We'll see.
Whoa.